A man is standing at the front desk of a five-star hotel in Rome, trying to check in for a romantic anniversary trip he planned for his wife. The reservation is under his name. The room was booked 8 weeks ago, but when the clerk pulls up the record, she tells him the room was already checked into this morning by his wife with someone else. A woman receives a LinkedIn connection request from a profile she does not recognize. She accepts out of professional habit. The profile's work history lists a company she knows well. She knows it because her husband founded it. The position listed under that company is not an employee role. It says co-founder. The name on the profile is a woman she has never heard of. The company was founded 6 years ago. Their wedding was 5 years ago. And a retired school principal discovers on the morning of his 65th birthday that his wife of 33 years has a second phone she has been paying for with a debit card registered to a name he does not recognize, his own address, his own zip code, a name that is not hers. Stay with me. Welcome back to Venture and Karma. Let's get into it. Story number 1. The Anniversary Room. James had spent 3 months planning the trip, not because he was an extravagant person by nature, but because this particular anniversary was the 20th, and 20 years felt like something that deserved to be marked properly. He and his wife, Claire, had met in their late 20s. They had built what he considered a good life. 2 children now in their teens, a house they had paid off 4 years ahead of schedule, careers that had developed steadily alongside the marriage. He had arranged everything without telling her. The flights, the hotel in Rome, a place she had mentioned wanting to visit in a conversation 5 years earlier that he had quietly noted and not forgotten. A dinner reservation at a restaurant with a view of the Colosseum. 3 days, no agenda, no obligations. He told her 2 weeks before the date. She cried in the way people cry when they are genuinely surprised by something they did not expect to feel so moved by. She said it was the most thoughtful thing anyone had ever done for her. The flight departed on a Saturday morning. James was at the airport 2 hours early. He waited at the gate. He watched the departure board. He called Claire at the time she should have been driving to the airport from their house. She did not answer. He called again. He sent a message. He waited. 30 minutes before boarding, she called him back. She said she was so sorry. She said something had come up with her mother and she had to go directly there, and she would explain everything later. She said to go without her. She said they would rebook. She sounded genuinely distressed. James boarded the plane alone. He told himself it was her mother. He spent the flight telling himself this. He landed in Rome on a Sunday morning. He took a taxi to the hotel. He stood at the front desk with his passport and his confirmation number. The clerk looked at the screen. She looked at James. She said the reservation had already been checked into that morning at 8:14 a.m. James asked her to repeat that. She repeated it. She was apologetic and professional. She said the primary name on the booking had checked in with a guest. She could not provide further information under the privacy policy. James asked for a different room. He paid the difference. He went upstairs. He sat on the edge of a bed in a hotel in Rome and understood several things simultaneously. Claire had not gone to her mother. She had come here, before him, with someone else, to the hotel he had chosen, to the room he had reserved, for the anniversary of a marriage She was apparently navigating in a direction he had not been informed of. He sat for a long time. Then he did something that would later strike him as the most consequential decision of the trip. He did not call her. He did not go home. He opened his laptop. He spent the rest of that Sunday and the entirety of Monday doing two things in parallel. The first was methodical. He contacted their joint financial institution and requested a complete transaction history for all shared accounts going back 18 months. He requested it in digital form, sent to his personal email address. The second was human. He went to the dinner he had booked. He sat at the table with the view of the Colosseum. He ordered food he could not fully taste. He watched the city outside the window. He thought about 20 years. He tried to identify where the structure had begun to fail and found that he could not point to a single moment, which told him something about how long it had been failing quietly. He flew home on Tuesday as scheduled. Claire was at the house when he arrived. She had a prepared explanation about her mother that she delivered with the specific fluency of someone who has rehearsed it. James listened to it completely. Then he said, "The hotel called me when a second guest checked in. Standard fraud protection on a premium booking. I know you were there." He said it without raising his voice. He had decided on the flight home that he was not going to have a loud conversation. He was going to have an accurate one. Claire was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I'm sorry." James said, "I know." He asked her one question. He asked her how long. She told him. It was longer than he had hoped and shorter than he had feared. Neither of those things made it easier. The transaction history arrived in his email that evening. He reviewed it with his attorney the following week. The documentation of undisclosed expenditures, hotel rooms, flights, dinners, paid with jointly held funds across 14 months, was clear and extensive. The divorce proceeded with the documentation in place. James retained the primary residence. The settlement reflected the 14 months of marital fund expenditure on the undisclosed relationship. He has been to Rome once since. He went alone on a different trip for different reasons. He sat at the same restaurant. The same table was not available. He sat at a different one with a slightly different view. He decided it was better.
Story number 2, the co-founder. Sandra was a marketing director who accepted LinkedIn connection requests on weekday mornings while drinking her first coffee. It was a reflex, not a habit she had examined closely. New request, mutual connections, accept, move on. The request that arrived on a Wednesday in March looked like all the others: a professional headshot, a title, a list of positions. She accepted it and moved on. 3 hours later, something pulled her back to it. She was not sure afterward what had made her look again. Perhaps it was the company name she had registered in the peripheral part of her attention without processing it fully. She opened the profile. The woman's most recent position was listed as co-founder at a company Sandra recognized immediately. Her husband, Martin, had founded the company 9 years ago, a small consultancy that had grown steadily into something with 12 employees and a solid client list. Sandra had heard the founding story many times. Martin told it at dinner parties. He had started it alone in their spare bedroom the year before their marriage. He had named it himself. He had built it himself. The profile in front of her listed the same company, with the same founding year, under the same name, with this woman named as co-founder. Sandra looked at the profile for a long time. Then she sent a message. She kept it neutral and professional.
She said she noticed the connection to the company and asked in what capacity the woman had been involved. The response came within the hour. The woman was friendly and apparently unsuspecting. She said she and Martin had built the company together from the beginning. She said she had stepped back from the operational side several years ago for personal reasons, but maintained a founding equity stake. She said Martin had mentioned expanding the team recently. She assumed that was why Sandra had reached out. Sandra thanked her for the context. She said she would be in touch. She closed the application. She thought about the spare bedroom. She thought about the year before their marriage when Martin had been building something he said he was building alone. She thought about the equity stake and what it meant that a portion of a company she had believed her husband wholly owned was held by a woman she had never heard of after 8 years of marriage. She thought about the personal reasons the woman had mentioned for stepping back, the timing she had referenced. Sandra was a precise person. She worked in a field that rewarded clarity and penalized assumptions. She did not assume. She engaged a corporate attorney and a family law attorney on the same day. The corporate attorney's investigation took 4 weeks. The company had 2 founding shareholders on record. Martin held 60%, the woman held 40%. The shareholding structure had existed since the company's incorporation and had never been amended. The family law attorney's analysis was direct. A 40% equity stake in a company valued at its current level represented a significant marital asset that Martin had failed to disclose in any financial documentation related to the marriage. The attorney also noted that the nature of the original co-founding relationship, which predated the marriage but had been deliberately concealed from Sandra, was relevant to the court's understanding of the pattern of financial non-disclosure within the marriage. The divorce proceedings took 11 months. Martin's attorney argued that the equity stake had been a source of tension between Martin and his co-founder, and that the relationship had been professionally dissolved years ago. Sandra's attorney noted that a dissolution of the professional relationship would have been reflected in the company's shareholder registry. It was not. The 40% stake remained active and undisclosed. The court ordered a full independent valuation of the company. The undisclosed stake was classified as a concealed marital asset. Sandra's settlement included a financial adjustment reflecting the full value of what had not been disclosed, structured in a way that did not require the company's operations to be disrupted. She did not want the company. She wanted what she was owed. She received it. She deleted the LinkedIn connection afterward. She also changed her morning reflex. She still accepts connection requests on weekday mornings, but now she reads the profiles first. She told a colleague some months after the settlement that the strangest part of the whole experience was that the answer arrived in her inbox uninvited on a Wednesday morning while she was drinking coffee and not looking for anything. She said she had spent a long time thinking about that. She said she had concluded that some things do not stay hidden indefinitely, regardless of how carefully they are arranged. Eventually, she said, the person who built the hiding place forgets one door, and the light comes through it.
2 stories. A man who flew to Rome alone and sat at the restaurant he had booked for 2. A woman who accepted a connection request on a Wednesday morning and found the door that had been left open for 8 years. In both cases, the discovery arrived without effort, without surveillance, without any of the deliberate searching that these situations usually require. It arrived because the person doing the concealing had reached the point that every sustained deception eventually reaches.
the point where there are simply too many moving parts to keep every one of them perfectly still. A hotel check-in that triggered a fraud alert. A LinkedIn profile that used the right company name in front of the wrong audience. Small failures. But in architecture, it is always the small failure that reveals where the structure was never sound. The third story today is different. It does not involve a business or a hotel room. It involves a man who spent 33 years believing he understood the life he was living, and a debit card registered to a name that was not his wife's, at his own address. Story number 3, the second card. Edward had retired from 30 years as a school principal with a reputation that mattered to him. He had been the kind of principal who knew every student's name, who showed up early and left late, who believed that an institution was only as reliable as the person responsible for it. He applied those standards to his marriage with equal consistency. He had been married to his wife, Helen, for 33 years. They had raised 3 children. They had navigated the ordinary complications of a long life together with the pragmatic patience of 2 people who had decided early on that the partnership was worth the work. On the morning of his 65th birthday, his youngest daughter organized a family breakfast at the house. All 3 children came. There was noise and coffee and a cake with an embarrassing number of candles. Helen was warm and present throughout. She had organized a gift that required knowing exactly what he wanted. She had known. In the afternoon, after the family left, Edward went to the kitchen to make tea. The counter held the morning's detritus, cups, a ribbon from one of the gift boxes, the small pile of envelopes and cards that had arrived in the post over the preceding days. One envelope had slipped behind the fruit bowl. He pulled it out. It was not a birthday card. It was a debit card statement, a bank he did not recognize, addressed to his home address. The name on the statement was not his. It was not Helen's. It was a name he had never seen. He looked at it for a moment. Then he did what a person who spent 30 years managing a large institution does automatically. He read it carefully. The account was active. It had been open for 4 years. The statement showed regular monthly transactions, 2 recurring payments he did not recognize, a pattern of purchases in the general area where he lived, a mobile phone provider, a storage facility, several restaurants he did not know. He placed the statement on the kitchen table. He made his tea. He sat down. He thought about several things. He thought about a name he did not recognize receiving mail at his address. He thought about a storage facility in a town 12 minutes away that someone was paying for monthly using an account that arrived in his letterbox. He thought about 4 years. He did not confront Helen that evening. It was his birthday. The children had been here. She had planned the breakfast carefully. He folded the statement and placed it in his jacket pocket. The following morning, he drove to the storage facility. He gave the account name at the front desk and said he was there on behalf of the account holder. The desk clerk asked for identification. Edward said he did not have identification in that name, but that the account was registered to his home address. He offered his own identification and the statement. The clerk consulted a supervisor. The supervisor reviewed the account. The address match was confirmed. They gave him the unit number. Edward drove to the unit. The combination on the lock was the date of their wedding anniversary. Inside were boxes. Organized, labeled boxes. The kind a methodical person packs when they are preserving things carefully. Photographs Edward had never seen. A relationship he had not known existed, documented across what he estimated, looking at the dates on envelopes and the progression of photographs, to be the better part of a decade. There was a phone in a small box, charged, still working, registered to the name on the statement. He sat in the storage unit for a long time. Then he locked it. He drove home. He made lunch. He said nothing. He called his eldest son that evening and asked that he recommend an attorney. He said it was a property matter and that he would explain later. He met with the attorney the following week and told him everything he had found. The attorney's first observation was that the financial infrastructure of the concealment, the separate account, the storage facility, the second phone, represented a sustained, deliberate effort to maintain a hidden life using funds and resources that required careful sourcing over a long period. The attorney asked Edward whether he wanted to understand the full scope of the financial picture first before any further steps. Edward said yes. The financial investigation took 6 weeks. The account that received the debit card statement had been funded primarily through a pattern of small, regular cash withdrawals from the joint household account. Over 4 years, the cumulative total was significant, not catastrophic, but significant and deliberate. Each withdrawal timed and sized to remain beneath the threshold that would have been visible in a monthly review. Edward read the investigation report with the same attention he had once given to school inspection documents. Then he asked his attorney to proceed. The divorce filing cited sustained financial deception and the deliberate concealment of a parallel life using marital funds over a documented 4-year period. Helen did not contest it. Edward suspected she had understood from the moment the debit card statement disappeared from the counter that the sequence of events had already begun. She had chosen not to preempt it. He had chosen not to discuss it. They were, in that specific way, still the same two people who had navigated 33 years of ordinary difficulty by arriving at parallel conclusions without needing to say everything out loud. The settlement was reached in 5 months. Edward kept the house. The financial recovery from the 4 years of redirected funds was reflected in the asset division. He still lives in the same house. He walks in the mornings. He has lunch with his children regularly. He has not opened the storage unit again. He transferred the account to his own name, paid 6 months in advance, and left it. He is not sure why. When his eldest son asked him about it, Edward said he thought some things were better left organized than disturbed. He said the person who built it did so carefully. That meant something to him, even now. He said he had spent 30 years teaching children that the effort a person puts into something tells you more about them than the thing itself. He said he was still thinking about what he had learned. He said he thought he would be thinking about it for a while yet.
3 stories. A man who flew to Rome alone and sat at a table for 2 with a view of the Colosseum and 30 years of a marriage he was beginning to understand differently. A woman who accepted a connection request on a Wednesday morning and found the co-founder nobody had mentioned in 8 years of dinners and conversations and financial disclosures. And a retired principal who found a debit card statement behind a fruit bowl on the morning of his 65th birthday and drove to a storage unit where a decade of a parallel life was organized into labeled boxes. 3 different situations. 3 people who could have looked away. None of them did. Not because looking was easy, not because what they found made anything simpler, but because the one thing all 3 of them shared was the understanding that a life built on accurate information, however painful that information is to receive, is more durable than a life built on something that feels easier and is not true. If these stories stayed with you,
Hit the like button and subscribe to Venture and Karma. We are back every week. Tell me in the comments which of these three you are still thinking about. James at the dinner table in Rome, Sandra and the LinkedIn request she almost didn't read, or Edward in a storage unit with a combination lock set to his wedding anniversary. I read every comment. Keep your eyes open, and I will see you in the next one.